Sarah Martinez stepped out of her old Honda Civic and stretched her tired muscles. The gas station's bright lights cut through the darkness of the late evening. She had been driving for 6 hours straight, making her way back home to Phoenix after visiting her sister in Denver. The long drive was taking its toll, and she needed coffee and fuel to make it through the final stretch. At 28 years old, Sarah carried herself with a quiet confidence that came from 4 years of service in the United States Marine Corps. She had completed 2 tours overseas and earned the respect of her fellow Marines through her dedication and courage under fire. Now working as a security consultant for a private firm, she still maintained the discipline and awareness that had kept her alive in dangerous situations abroad. The gas station sat on a lonely stretch of highway in rural New Mexico. Few cars passed by at this hour, and the nearest town was still 30 miles away. Sarah chose this particular stop because it was well lit and appeared clean and safe. She always trusted her instincts when it came to personal security, a habit that had served her well during her military service. As she filled her tank, Sarah noticed a black pickup truck parked near the side of the building. 2 men sat inside, their faces partially hidden in the shadows. Something about their behavior caught her attention. They seemed to be watching the few customers who came and went, studying their movements with unusual interest. Her military training had taught her to notice details that others might miss, and these men were definitely worth watching. The first man was tall and thin, probably in his early 30s, with tattoos covering his arms. The second was shorter but more heavily built, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. They had been sitting in the truck for at least 15 minutes without getting out to buy anything or pump gas. Their presence made Sarah slightly uncomfortable, but she tried to dismiss her concerns as paranoia from too many years in combat zones. After filling her tank, Sarah walked toward the convenience store to pay for her gas and grab some coffee. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and she was greeted by the familiar smell of hot dogs rotating on metal rollers and the hum of refrigeration units. The store clerk, a young man who looked barely out of high school, gave her a friendly nod from behind the counter. Sarah picked up a large coffee and added cream and sugar, taking her time to observe her surroundings. Through the large windows, she could still see the black pickup truck. The 2 men were now looking directly at the store, and one of them was pointing in her direction. Her stomach tightened with a familiar feeling she had experienced many times during patrol missions in hostile territory. The young clerk seemed nervous as she approached the counter. His hand shook slightly as he rang up her purchases, and he kept glancing toward the windows. When Sarah followed his gaze, she noticed that one of the men from the truck was now standing outside the store, positioned near the entrance. The second man had moved to the other side of the building, effectively blocking both potential escape routes. Sarah paid for her items and thanked the clerk, her mind already working through possible scenarios. She had faced dangerous situations before, but this felt different. In the military, she had the support of her unit and superior firepower. Here she was alone and outnumbered, with limited options for calling for help. Her cell phone showed only 1 bar of signal, and the nearest police station was probably an hour away. As she approached the store's exit, the man standing outside made no effort to move aside. He was the taller of the 2, and up close Sarah could see that his tattoos included several symbols associated with white supremacist groups. His eyes were cold and calculating, and he smiled in a way that made her skin crawl. She could smell alcohol on his breath as she tried to walk past him. The man stepped directly into her path, forcing her to stop. His companion had now moved closer to the store's entrance, cutting off her retreat. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She assessed her immediate environment, looking for weapons, cover, and potential allies. The young clerk was watching through the window but seemed too frightened to help. She was essentially on her own. The first man spoke in a low, threatening voice that carried clear menace. He made several crude comments about her appearance and suggested that she might want to come with them for some fun. His words were slurred from drinking, but his intentions were crystal clear. Sarah had encountered men like this before. Predators who saw women as easy targets and used intimidation to get what they wanted. Sarah responded calmly, telling them she just wanted to go to her car and continue her journey. She kept her voice steady and non-threatening, hoping to diffuse the situation without violence. Her military experience had taught her that sometimes the best strategy was to appear cooperative while looking for an opportunity to escape or fight back. The second man laughed and moved even closer, now standing just a few feet away. He was carrying something in his right hand, keeping it partially hidden behind his back. Sarah's peripheral vision caught the outline of what appeared to be a weapon, though she couldn't be certain in the dim lighting. Her heart rate increased, but her breathing remained controlled. This was exactly the kind of situation she had trained for during her years of service. The two men began to close in on her, their intentions becoming increasingly clear. They spoke about taking her somewhere private where no one would hear her scream. Their words were filled with graphic descriptions of what they planned to do, and their confidence suggested they had done this before. Sarah realized that talking her way out of this situation was no longer an option. As the men continued their verbal assault, Sarah began to shift her weight and position herself for action. She noticed that the taller man was favoring his left leg, possibly from an old injury, while the shorter one kept his weapon hand partially concealed. These small details could make the difference between survival and becoming another statistic. Her military training had taught her to exploit every advantage. No matter how small, the situation was escalating rapidly, and Sarah knew that within the next few moments, she would have to make a choice that could determine whether she made it home alive. The two predators had clearly underestimated their intended victim, and they were about to learn a lesson that would change their lives forever. The shorter man reached behind his back and pulled out a black pistol, pointing it directly at Sarah's chest. The weapon gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the gas station, and his finger rested dangerously close to the trigger. His companion grinned widely, clearly enjoying the fear they expected to see in their victim's eyes. Both men had done this before, and they were confident that the sight of the gun would make Sarah completely compliant with their demands. Sarah's reaction was not what they expected. Instead of panic or pleading, her expression remained calm and focused. Her years of military training had prepared her for moments exactly like this. She had faced enemy combatants armed with much more sophisticated weapons than a simple handgun, and she had survived encounters that would have broken most people. The two predators had chosen the wrong target. The man with the gun stepped closer, pressing the barrel against Sarah's ribs. He whispered threats about what would happen if she didn't cooperate, his voice filled with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the power. His partner moved to block any potential witnesses from seeing what was happening, positioning himself between Sarah and the store clerk who was still watching nervously from behind the counter. Sarah's mind raced through her options with the cold efficiency of a combat veteran. She calculated distances, angles, and timing, with the precision that had kept her alive during firefights in hostile territory. The man holding the gun was standing too close, a tactical error that would cost him dearly. His partner was positioned poorly, focused more on intimidation than on maintaining control of the situation. The gunman made his first critical mistake by getting within arm's reach. Sarah had trained extensively in close-quarters combat, learning techniques designed specifically for disarming armed opponents. She knew that once someone got close enough to touch you with a weapon, they had actually given you the opportunity to take it away from them. The key was speed, surprise, and absolute commitment to the action. Without warning, Sarah's training took over. In one fluid motion, she grabbed the gunman's wrist with her left hand, while simultaneously driving her right elbow into his solar plexus. The impact knocked the wind out of him and caused him to double over in pain. Before he could recover, she twisted his wrist sharply, applying pressure to nerve points that forced his fingers to open involuntarily. The gun fell to the asphalt with a metallic clatter, and Sarah immediately kicked it away from both attackers. The entire disarming sequence had taken less than 3 seconds, executed with the precision of someone who had practiced these movements thousands of times. The shorter man staggered backward, gasping for air and clutching his chest where her elbow had connected. His taller companion rushed forward, trying to help his partner and regain control of the situation. This was exactly what Sarah had expected, and she was ready for him. As he approached, she grabbed his outstretched arm and used his own momentum against him, executing a perfect hip throw that sent him crashing to the ground. The impact knocked the air out of his lungs and left him temporarily stunned. Sarah moved quickly to secure the weapon, picking up the pistol and checking its condition with the automatic precision of her military training. She ejected the magazine and racked the slide to clear the chamber, ensuring that the weapon could not be used against her, even if one of the attackers managed to regain possession of it. The entire process took only seconds. but it demonstrated a level of weapons familiarity that clearly shocked both men. The shorter attacker was beginning to recover from the elbow strike, but he was now looking at Sarah with a mixture of confusion and growing fear. This was not how their plan was supposed to unfold. They had targeted what they thought was a helpless woman traveling alone, but instead they had encountered someone with advanced combat training and the will to use it effectively. Sarah stood between the two men and their escape route, holding the disabled weapon in one hand while maintaining a defensive posture. Her voice was calm but carried an unmistakable tone of authority as she ordered both men to remain on the ground. The confidence and command presence she had developed during her years of military service were now on full display. The taller man tried to get to his feet, probably planning to rush her or attempt to flee. Sarah stepped forward and delivered a precise kick to his midsection that sent him back to the asphalt. Her movements were controlled and efficient, designed to neutralize threats without causing unnecessary injury. She had no desire to seriously harm these men, but she was prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect herself. Inside the convenience store, the young clerk had called 911 and was providing a breathless account of what he was witnessing. His voice shook as he described the scene to the emergency operator, barely able to believe that the small woman was successfully controlling two much larger attackers. The dispatcher assured him that police units were already en route to the location. Both attackers were now fully aware that they had made a terrible mistake. The woman they had targeted was not a victim, but a trained warrior who had turned their own ambush against them. The shorter man was still having trouble breathing from the elbow strike, while his companion was dealing with the pain from being thrown to the ground and kicked in the stomach. Sarah maintained her position, keeping both men in sight while listening for the sound of approaching sirens. Her situational awareness remained sharp, scanning for any additional threats or complications. She knew that cornered predators could become even more dangerous, and she was prepared for the possibility that they might try something desperate. The two men began to realize that their only option was to try to escape before the police arrived. They had initially planned to overpower and abduct their victim, but now they were facing the very real possibility of spending years in prison for attempted kidnapping and armed assault. Their simple plan had turned into a nightmare, and they needed to find a way out. The shorter man whispered something to his partner, probably suggesting that they should run for their truck and try to flee the scene. But Sarah had positioned herself strategically to prevent exactly that scenario. She stood between them and their vehicle, and any attempt to reach it would require getting past her. Given what she had already demonstrated, neither man was eager to test her combat skills again. As the sound of sirens grew louder in the distance, both attackers began to panic. They had gone from being in complete control of the situation to being trapped by their intended victim. The tables had turned completely, and they were beginning to understand that they had targeted someone far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The taller man decided to make a desperate move. He suddenly lunged toward Sarah, hoping to tackle her and create an opening for his partner to escape. This was another critical error in judgment. Sarah had been expecting exactly this kind of desperate action, and she was more than ready to respond. Her military training had taught her to always anticipate an opponent's next move, especially when they were cornered and running out of options. As the man rushed toward her, Sarah sidestepped smoothly and grabbed his arm, using his own forward momentum to send him sprawling past her and into the side of a nearby trash can. The metallic crash echoed through the night air as he collided with the metal container, sending garbage spilling across the asphalt. He hit the ground hard and rolled several times before coming to a stop, clearly dazed from the impact. The shorter man saw his opportunity and scrambled to his feet, trying to reach their pickup truck while Sarah was dealing with his partner. But Sarah's peripheral vision caught his movement immediately. Without taking her eyes off the man she had just thrown, she called out a sharp command for the second attacker to stop where he was. Her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed under pressure. When the shorter man ignored her command and continued running toward the truck, Sarah made a quick decision. She couldn't allow both attackers to escape, especially since they might target another innocent victim later that night. She sprinted after him with the speed and endurance that had made her one of the top performers in her Marine unit's physical fitness tests. The man reached the driver's side door of the pickup truck and fumbled with the handle, his hands shaking from adrenaline and fear. He could hear Sarah's footsteps getting closer, and panic was affecting his coordination. The keys slipped from his trembling fingers and fell to the ground just as Sarah reached him. She grabbed his shoulder and spun him around, away from the vehicle. Facing Sarah directly for the first time since the confrontation began, the man could see something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. This was not the look of a frightened woman fighting for her life. Instead, he saw the calm, focused expression of a professional warrior who was completely in control of the situation. Her breathing was steady, her movements were precise, and she showed no signs of the fear or panic that he and his partner had expected to create. The man raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, finally understanding that he was completely outmatched. He had spent years intimidating people through size and threats, but he had never encountered anyone like Sarah. Her confidence and skill were unlike anything he had experienced, and he was beginning to comprehend the magnitude of their mistake in targeting her. Sarah ordered him to lie face down on the asphalt with his hands behind his back. Her tone left no room for argument, and the man complied immediately. She had learned these techniques during military police training, and she applied them with the same precision she brought to everything else. Within moments, she had both attackers in secure positions where they could not threaten her or escape. The sound of approaching sirens was getting much louder now, and Sarah could see the flashing lights of multiple police vehicles approaching on the distant highway. The cavalry was finally arriving, but she had managed to control the entire situation without their assistance. This was a source of quiet satisfaction for her, proof that her years of training and preparation had not been wasted. The store clerk emerged from the convenience store, still talking rapidly to the 911 operator on his phone. He approached Sarah cautiously, clearly amazed by what he had witnessed. In his young life, he had never seen anything like the display of skill and courage that Sarah had just demonstrated. She had turned what should have been a victim situation into a complete tactical victory. Sarah maintained her vigilant watch over both attackers while waiting for the police to arrive. She knew that dangerous situations could change rapidly, and she would not allow herself to relax until proper authorities had taken control. Her military experience had taught her that overconfidence or premature celebration could lead to disaster, even when victory seemed certain. The first police cruiser arrived within minutes, followed quickly by 2 more patrol cars and an ambulance. The officers approached the scene with weapons drawn, not immediately certain who was the victim and who were the perpetrators. The scene was certainly unusual, with a small woman standing guard over 2 much larger men who were lying face down on the asphalt. Sarah immediately identified herself to the responding officers and provided a clear, concise account of what had transpired. Her calm demeanor and precise description of events immediately established her credibility with the police. The lead officer, a veteran sergeant with 20 years of experience, recognized the signs of military training in her bearing and communication style. The 2 attackers were handcuffed and placed in separate patrol cars while the officers gathered evidence and took statements. The disabled pistol was recovered and secured as evidence, along with several other items found in the men's pickup truck. A search of their vehicle revealed additional weapons, restraints, and other materials that suggested they had been planning something far worse than simple robbery. As the police interviewed the store clerk and examined the scene, a clearer picture of what had almost happened began to emerge. Security camera footage from the gas station showed the entire confrontation, providing clear evidence of the attacker's intent and Sarah's justified response. The footage would later prove crucial in prosecuting the case against both men. The shorter attacker, still nursing his injured ribs from Sarah's elbow strike, began talking to the police almost immediately. He seemed eager to cooperate, perhaps hoping that his assistance might lead to reduced charges. His account confirmed what the video evidence already showed, that they had targeted Sarah with the intent to abduct her and had threatened her with a loaded weapon. His taller partner remained silent, refusing to answer questions or provide any statement to the investigating officers. However, his silence would not help him avoid the serious charges that were already being prepared. The evidence against both men was overwhelming, and their criminal history would soon reveal that this was not their first attempt at such a crime. As the night wore on, Sarah found herself reflecting on how quickly the situation had escalated and resolved. Less than an hour ago, she had been a tired traveler stopping for gas and coffee. Now she was the key witness in a major criminal case, having prevented what could have been a tragedy through the application of skills she had learned during her military service. Detective Maria Gonzalez arrived at the scene 30 minutes after the initial police response. She was a seasoned investigator with the state police, specializing in violent crimes and cases involving attempted kidnapping. As she surveyed the scene and reviewed the preliminary reports, she immediately recognized that this case was going to be significant. The evidence was overwhelming, and the victim's response had been nothing short of extraordinary. Detective Gonzalez approached Sarah, who was sitting in the back of an ambulance while a paramedic checked her for injuries. Despite having just fought off 2 armed attackers, Sarah showed no signs of trauma or distress. Her vital signs were normal, she had no visible injuries, and she appeared completely composed. The paramedic confirmed that she was in excellent physical condition and required no medical treatment. During her interview with Detective Gonzalez, Sarah provided a detailed account of the evening's events. She described how she had first noticed the suspicious behavior of the 2 men, their positioning around the gas station, and the escalation that led to the confrontation. Her military background had taught her to observe and remember important details, making her an ideal witness for the prosecution case that would follow. Detective Gonzalez was particularly impressed by Sarah's tactical awareness and decision-making during the confrontation. As a law enforcement professional, she understood how difficult it was to maintain composure under such circumstances. Sarah's ability to disarm a gunman and control both attackers without seriously injuring them demonstrated remarkable skill and restraint. Most people in similar situations would have panicked or made mistakes that could have led to tragedy. The investigation revealed disturbing details about the 2 attackers. The shorter man, identified as Marcus Thompson, had a lengthy criminal record including charges for assault, battery, and attempted sexual assault. His partner, Robert Hayes, was a registered sex offender with multiple convictions for violent crimes against women. Together, they had been targeting isolated victims along this stretch of highway for several months. Police discovered that Thompson and Hayes had been living in a remote cabin about 50 miles from the gas station. A search warrant executed the following morning revealed evidence linking them to at least 3 other attacks in the region. Their cabin contained photographs of potential victims, detailed maps of isolated locations, and restraints that had likely been used in previous crimes. Sarah's successful defense had prevented her from becoming their 4th victim. The security footage from the gas station provided crystal clear evidence of the entire confrontation. The video showed Thompson drawing the pistol and threatening Sarah, followed by her lightning-fast disarming technique and subsequent control of both attackers. Legal experts who later reviewed the footage described it as a textbook example of lawful self-defense executed with remarkable skill and precision. News of the incident began to spread quickly through law enforcement circles and eventually reached the media. Sarah's story captured public attention because it demonstrated how military training could be applied effectively in civilian situations. Many people were inspired by her courage and competence, while others were shocked by how close she had come to becoming a victim of serious violence. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the incident, describing Sarah as a hero who had prevented a potential tragedy through her quick thinking and military training. The article detailed her service record and explained how her Marine Corps experience had prepared her for the confrontation. The story resonated with readers who were impressed by her courage and grateful for her service to the country. Sarah found the media attention somewhat uncomfortable, preferring to maintain a low profile and return to her normal life. She had simply done what her training had taught her to do, applying skills that had been drilled into her during her years of military service. In her view, there was nothing heroic about defending herself against criminal attack. It was simply a matter of survival and proper preparation. The prosecutor assigned to the case, District Attorney James Mitchell, recognized that this would be one of the strongest cases he had ever handled. The evidence was overwhelming. The victim was an excellent witness, and the defendants had extensive criminal histories that would make conviction almost certain. He decided to pursue the maximum possible charges against both men, including attempted kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit violent felonies. During the bail hearing, both Thompson and Hayes were denied release pending trial. The judge cited their extensive criminal histories, the serious nature of the current charges, and the risk they posed to public safety. Evidence presented during the hearing revealed that they had been planning to target multiple victims during what they called their hunting trip through the southwestern states. Sarah was contacted by several organizations that wanted to recognize her actions during the incident. The Marine Corps League offered to present her with a Civilian Service Award, while a national women's safety organization asked her to speak at their annual conference. She politely declined most of these offers, preferring to maintain her privacy and avoid becoming a public figure. The two attackers soon realized that their legal situation was hopeless. The evidence against them was overwhelming. They had been caught in the act, and their victim had proven to be far more capable than they had anticipated. Their court-appointed attorneys advised them that their best option would be to negotiate plea agreements rather than risk much longer sentences if they went to trial and lost. Thompson, the man who had pointed the gun at Sarah, was the first to crack under pressure. Faced with the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison, he agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. His testimony revealed details about other crimes they had committed and helped authorities close several cold cases in neighboring states. Hayes remained defiant longer, apparently believing that he could somehow beat the charges despite the overwhelming evidence against him. His attorney eventually convinced him that resistance was futile, and he too agreed to enter a guilty plea rather than face the uncertainty of a jury trial. The plea negotiations would determine exactly how many years both men would spend behind bars. Sarah received regular updates about the case from Detective Gonzalez and the prosecutor's office. She was gratified to learn that her actions had helped solve other crimes and potentially prevented future attacks. The investigation had revealed that Thompson and Hayes had been escalating their criminal behavior and might have eventually committed murder if they had not been stopped. As the legal proceedings continued, Sarah reflected on how her military training had literally saved her life. The skills she had learned during her years of service had proved their value in the most dramatic way possible. She felt a renewed appreciation for the discipline and preparation that had been instilled in her during her time in the Marine Corps. The incident also reinforced Sarah's belief in the importance of personal preparedness and situational awareness. She began considering whether she should share her experience with others, perhaps by teaching self-defense classes or speaking to women's groups about personal safety. Her story could potentially help other people avoid becoming victims of violent crime. 3 months after the incident, Sarah found herself sitting in a crowded courtroom as the formal sentencing hearing began. Both Thompson and Hayes had pled guilty to multiple charges, including attempted kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy to commit violent crimes. The plea agreements had saved the state the expense of a lengthy trial, but more importantly for Sarah, they had ensured that both men would face serious consequences for their actions. Judge Robert Anderson presided over the sentencing hearing with the gravity that such serious crimes demanded. Before announcing the sentences, he reviewed the extensive evidence in the case, including the security camera footage that clearly showed the attack and Sarah's remarkable response. The judge noted that this was one of the most clear-cut cases of justifiable self-defense that had ever come before his court. Thompson was sentenced first, receiving 25 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. His cooperation with investigators had earned him some consideration, but his extensive criminal history and the serious nature of his crimes still warranted a substantial sentence. As the judge read the sentence, Thompson showed no emotion, perhaps finally understanding the full consequences of his actions that night. Hayes received an even harsher sentence of 30 years without possibility of parole for 20 years. His refusal to cooperate with the investigation and his status as a repeat offender worked against him during sentencing. The judge specifically noted that Hayes had shown no remorse for his crimes and appeared to represent a continuing threat to public safety. His criminal career had finally caught up with him in a way that would keep him locked away for most of his remaining life. During the victim impact portion of the hearing, Sarah was given the opportunity to address the court and the defendants. She spoke clearly and calmly about how the incident had affected her, emphasizing that she felt fortunate to have had the training necessary to defend herself. She also spoke about the other victims that Thompson and Hayes had targeted, noting that not everyone would be as prepared as she had been to defend against such an attack. Sarah's statement to the court was powerful and moving, but it was delivered without emotion or drama. She simply stated the facts about what had happened and expressed her hope that the sentences would prevent these men from harming others in the future. Her composed demeanor and articulate presentation impressed everyone in the courtroom, including the defense attorneys who had hoped their clients might receive some sympathy. After the sentencing, Detective Gonzalez approached Sarah in the courthouse hallway. The detective had become something of a mentor to Sarah during the months of investigation and legal proceedings. She congratulated Sarah on her courage and told her that the case had become something of a legend within the state police department. Officers were using the security footage as a training tool to show how proper situational awareness and defensive tactics could prevent tragedy. The media coverage of the sentencing was extensive, with several news outlets running follow-up stories about Sarah's remarkable defense against the attackers. A local television station produced a special feature about the case, interviewing law enforcement officials and self-defense experts who praised Sarah's actions. The story served as both an inspiration and an educational tool for viewers who wanted to learn about personal safety. Sarah had mixed feelings about the media attention, but she recognized that her story might help other people prepare themselves for dangerous situations. She agreed to a limited number of interviews, using them as opportunities to emphasize the importance of training, awareness, and preparation. She wanted people to understand that her successful defense was not the result of luck or natural ability, but rather years of dedicated training and practice. The Marine Corps took notice of the positive publicity surrounding one of their former members. Sarah was invited to speak at several military installations about the value of the training that service members receive and how those skills can be applied in civilian life. These speaking engagements gave her an opportunity to connect with current Marines and share her experience about transitioning from military to civilian careers. Sarah's security consulting business began, receiving more clients after the publicity surrounding her case. Companies and individuals who had read about her experience wanted to hire someone with proven abilities to assess their security needs. Her reputation for competence and courage opened doors that might have otherwise remained closed to a relatively new business. The incident also had a broader impact on law enforcement training in the region. Several police departments began incorporating lessons learned from Sarah's case into their tactical training programs. The way she had controlled the situation while waiting for police backup became a model for how civilian defenders should handle similar circumstances. Her restraint in not seriously injuring the attackers while still neutralizing the threat was particularly noteworthy. Women's self-defense organizations across the country began using Sarah's story as an example of how proper training could make the difference between becoming a victim and surviving an attack. Several groups invited her to speak at their events, and she gradually became more comfortable with sharing her experience in public. She developed a presentation that focused on practical safety tips, rather than just recounting the dramatic events of that night. The gas station where the incident occurred installed additional security measures and better lighting in response to what had happened. The young clerk who had witnessed the confrontation left his job there within a month, apparently traumatized by what he had seen. However, he later wrote a letter to Sarah thanking her for her courage and telling her that watching her defend herself had inspired him to take self-defense classes. Sarah maintained contact with some of the other victims that Thompson and Hayes had attacked before targeting her. These women had not been as fortunate as Sarah, and their experiences served as a sobering reminder of what could have happened if she had not been prepared to defend herself. She provided emotional support to these victims and helped connect them with resources for counseling and recovery. The investigating officers noticed a significant decrease in similar crimes along that stretch of highway after news of the incident spread. Apparently, other predators who had been operating in the area decided to move their activities elsewhere, rather than risk encountering another victim who might be prepared to fight back. Sarah's successful defense had created a deterrent effect that protected other potential victims. As the first anniversary of the incident approached, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed as a result of that night at the gas station. She had become an inadvertent spokesperson for personal preparedness and self-defense, roles she had never sought but had gradually embraced. Her experience had shown her the importance of sharing knowledge and skills that could help others protect themselves. The case files were eventually closed, With Thompson and Hayes beginning their long prison sentences, Sarah could finally move forward with her life, knowing that justice had been served and that these particular predators would not be able to harm anyone else for many years to come. The nightmarish encounter had transformed into something positive, a story of courage and preparation that inspired others to take responsibility for their own safety. 2 years after the gas station incident, Sarah had established herself as one of the most respected self-defense instructors in the Southwest. Her classes were always full, with waiting lists of people who wanted to learn from someone who had proven her skills in a real-world situation. She taught not just physical techniques, but also the mental preparation and situational awareness that had allowed her to recognize and respond to the threat that night. Sarah's approach to teaching was heavily influenced by her military background. She emphasized discipline, repetition, and mental preparation alongside the physical skills needed for self-defense. Her students learned to observe their surroundings, trust their instincts, and maintain composure under pressure. These lessons went far beyond simple fighting techniques to include comprehensive personal safety strategies. The security consulting firm that Sarah had started before the incident had grown significantly. Corporate clients sought her expertise not just for traditional security assessments, but also for training their employees in personal safety and threat recognition. Her reputation for competence and her unique background made her one of the most sought-after consultants in her field. Sarah often thought about that night at the gas station and how it had changed the trajectory of her life. What could have been a tragic ending had instead become a new beginning. The skills she had learned during her military service had not only saved her life, but had also opened opportunities she never could have imagined. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the training that had prepared her for that moment. Detective Gonzalez had become a close friend over the months following the incident. They occasionally met for coffee to discuss new cases or developments in personal safety training. The detective often told Sarah that her case had changed how she approached similar investigations, providing insights into how victims could protect themselves and how law enforcement could better support them. The young gas station clerk, whose name was David, had indeed taken self-defense classes after witnessing Sarah's confrontation with the attackers. He had also changed careers, becoming a police officer with the same department that had responded to the emergency call that night. He credited Sarah's example with inspiring him to pursue a career in law enforcement, wanting to help protect others the way she had protected herself. Sarah received regular updates about Thompson and Hayes through the victim notification system. Both men were serving their sentences in maximum security facilities, with Thompson having been involved in several disciplinary incidents that had extended his time behind bars. Hayes had adapted better to prison life, but showed no signs of rehabilitation or remorse for his crimes. Neither man would be eligible for parole for many years to come. The gas station had been renovated and now featured Sarah's story prominently in their security awareness materials. The owner had installed a memorial plaque near the entrance, not to commemorate tragedy, but to celebrate courage and preparedness. The location had become something of a pilgrimage site for self-defense enthusiasts and military veterans who wanted to see where one of their own had demonstrated such remarkable skill and composure. Sarah's story had been featured in several military publications and law enforcement journals. Her case was studied in criminal justice programs as an example of effective victim response, and in military training courses as a demonstration of how service skills translated to civilian situations. The security footage from that night had become one of the most watched training videos in law enforcement and military circles. The impact of Sarah's successful defense extended far beyond her personal story. Crime statistics showed a measurable decrease in attacks against women along that highway corridor, as word of the incident had spread through criminal networks. Predators had apparently decided that the risk of encountering another prepared victim was too high, leading them to avoid the area or abandon their criminal activities altogether. Sarah had been approached by several publishers who wanted her to write a book about her experience. She had initially resisted these offers, but eventually agreed to work with a ghostwriter to produce a practical guide to personal safety that used her story as a framework for teaching situational awareness and self-defense. The book became a bestseller and further established her as an expert in the field. The Marine Corps had officially recognized Sarah's actions with a Civilian Service Award, acknowledging how her conduct had reflected positively on the training and values instilled during military service. The ceremony was attended by her former commanding officers and fellow Marines, many of whom expressed pride in seeing their training applied so effectively in civilian life. Sarah's parents, who had initially worried about her military service and the dangers she might face overseas, came to understand that the skills she had learned had ultimately saved her life in a situation much closer to home. They became strong supporters of her work in teaching others to protect themselves, recognizing that their daughter had found her true calling in helping others develop the confidence and skills needed to stay safe. The incident had also strengthened Sarah's relationship with the veteran community. She became active in organizations that helped transitioning service members find careers that utilized their military skills. Her success story became an inspiration for other veterans who were struggling to find their place in civilian life, showing them that their training had value beyond the military environment. As Sarah reflected on the 5 years that had passed since that night, she realized that what could have been the worst moment of her life had actually become the foundation for everything good that followed. Her military training had given her the tools to survive, but the incident had given her the purpose to help others develop those same tools for themselves. The legacy of that confrontation continued to grow. Sarah's students went on to teach others, creating a network of prepared and aware individuals who were less likely to become victims of violent crime. The ripple effects of her successful defense had touched hundreds of lives, creating a community of people who understood that personal safety was a responsibility that required preparation, training, and constant vigilance. Sarah continued to carry the lessons of her military service with her every day. But now she also carried the knowledge that those lessons had proven their worth when it mattered most. The skills that had been drilled into her during countless hours of training had functioned exactly as intended when her life depended on them. She had pointed a gun at her, but they had discovered too late that they were threatening someone who was more than capable of defending herself. The story of that night at the gas station had become more than just a tale of successful self-defense. It had become a testament to the value of preparation, the importance of training, and the power of courage when faced with evil. Sarah's response to that threat had not only saved her own life, but had created a legacy that would continue to protect others for years to come.